Hey. I'm so excited. This has been such an awesome event. I want to live in a world where our actions do not reflect the fear that we feel. Fear is one of the biggest things that holds us back. It changes the way we see ourselves and then changes what we do and limits what we do. Can anyone relate? I have had so many times fear has held me back. So there's a play that Shakespeare starts with saying, all the world's a stage. And I've often thought about my life as a metaphor for a stage play. I love to help people. Shocking, I'm a therapist. And I always pictured myself as the stagehand behind the scenes in the dark, running around, changing the set to support the actors, to support the production so that everything went smooth. But I couldn't picture myself on the stage, especially not front and center. And it took me a long time to realize that that was fear. I was scared to be up in front of people. So years ago, somebody suggested, actually, a few people suggested, I should use Facebook Live as a showcase for my speaking. And my initial response was, no, that doesn't work with my personality. Talking into a screen where I can't see anybody else, I'm way too social for that. I need something more interactive. Now, of course, that was pre-pandemic when all we do now is talk into screens with or without faces. It's everyday life. But at the time, this is what I convinced myself. And when I would talk to people about why I wasn't going to go live on Facebook, I came up with the most logical and rational explanations about why this didn't fit me. But what I was missing was that all that logic was really fear dressing up in a really nice outfit. Fear had disguised itself as logic. And as such, I didn't realize that I was experiencing fear. It wasn't until I gave some real consideration to going live on Facebook and I felt that fear rise up in me in a very palpable and tangible way that I could no longer ignore it. And I had to admit that I was experiencing fear. Fear is such a powerful emotion. It sits in our bodies and in our minds. And it's necessary because it's part of how we survive. It helps us respond to threats. But what happens when we interpret a situation as a threat and it's not a threat? With that misinterpretation, then we have a misguided response. Fear can cause us to act in a way that's not quite ourselves. It can cloud our judgment. It can cause us to act outside of our values, go in the opposite direction of where we want it to go. And worse yet, it can stop us dead in our tracks and immobilize us. So again, with this idea that I was picturing myself as a stagehand behind the scenes, fear was what was limiting my thoughts. I knew I liked to help people and I love to help, and I don't need an audience to do that. But fear was limiting where I saw I could be of help. And it wasn't until I stopped allowing fear to dictate my movements until I realized I can step up on stage and I can help people from that platform. And there were so many other spaces that I could be of help, and I didn't have to be behind the scenes in order to be of help. So one of the things that I really want to stress, fear is an entity, and we can either feed it or we can starve it. I think one of the biggest barriers to dealing with, though, is we don't always know that it's fear coming into play. And when we don't know what we're dealing with, how do we even know that we're feeding it? And that's what happened to me when I was contemplating going live on Facebook. I had any number of explanations as to why it didn't make sense for me to do it. And so what I didn't realize that I was doing was I was feeding that fear with all those rationalizations. Some years ago, people were encouraging me to buy a place to live. I lived in this really cute place. I was paying nowhere near market value rent, which allowed me to drop down my hours, go back to school, get my undergrad degree, do it again some years later and get a graduate degree. Fantastic. But when I was done school and I could afford more, I would explain to people who would ask me, why aren't you buying a place? Well, the responsible and logical thing to do is to continue to save money and to keep my expenses down. So I was being logical and I was being responsible. And who could ever fault me for being responsible? But once again, fear was part of the equation. I hadn't realized that fear dressed itself up and put on a logical outfit, had put on the responsibility outfit. And so I wasn't seeing it for what it was. And it wasn't until I unmasked the fear and saw it for what it was that I was able to step past it and access more. So I'm so happy to tell you, I'm presenting from the home that I bought when I was able to move past fear. And that's not to say that every step of the process, I didn't feel fear because I was scared the whole time. But I'm so glad to say it didn't stop me. And I learned a valuable lesson. We can feel fear and do anyways. So I'm here to help you unmask fear, for you to leap into and leap past all the limitations that you have that are fear induced into the life that you know that you're purposed to live. I have 4 steps on how you unmask fear. First, admit the limit. What is it that you want to do that you're not doing? Number 2, name it, call it out, name it as fear, and get even more specific, unmask it. And when I say unmask it, what do I mean by that? Dig a little bit deeper. So when I was trying to go live on Facebook or thinking about it, I wasn't seeing fear, I was seeing logic. And so when we unmask fear, we recognize that sometimes it's logic, sometimes it's obligation, sometimes it's responsibility, and all these pleasant words come to mind that it's really fear disguising itself. And so we have to take the mask off, see fear for what it really is, so we actually can address it as such. Number 3, stop feeding the fear monster. Cut it off at the source, close the curtain on fear. Again, back to me going live on Facebook. I was feeding it with all my rational explanations. I had to stop using that logic or what I thought was logic and stop feeding it in order to step past it. Fear is fueled in our thoughts. So my question for you today is, what thoughts do you need to stop entertaining so that you can move forward and take the steam and the power out of fear in your life? And the last one, and I apologize for using an overused word in the pandemic, but pivot, change your direction, write out and live a new narrative. Again, going back to the idea of being on stage, end the scene and start a new act. It takes shifting what you're doing. You have to do different to see different results. So are you ready for change? Are you ready to take the limits off? Are you ready to step up on stage? If so, I invite you to come and talk with me. I love discussing with people how to recognize fear for all the ways that it masks itself and disguises itself, rip those masks off so that we can step beyond it and step into our destiny, into our purpose, and into our passion. This is what I love to do. This lights me up. I said, we got to challenge the narrative, or we got to change the narrative. So the last thing that I'm going to leave with you is how I change the narrative in my life. And I take every step that I've given, I take daily and regularly in my life because fear continues to rear its ugly head. But what I've started to tell myself is, it's not that I'm fearless, but I do more now because I choose to fear less. Thank you so much.